This video is sponsored by me. Read my original novel, Dance of Frozen Death. Link in the description. Greetings, fellow mortals. In my previous video on tropes, I claimed that writing is as much a science as it is an art form. In order to make a compelling story, you have to use the right ingredients at the right time and in the right way. If you don't, whatever you're cooking is going to fall apart. Sometimes it just leaves a minor imperfection. A good example would be from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, where the wishing star became a MacGuffin because it really didn't matter in the end. That's a minor problem that could easily be forgotten because of the movie's other various achievements. Other times, the flaws can cause the entire project to fall apart. One of the most famous examples is the plot twist trope. Stories relying on that twist can make or break. It can be the glory that is The Sixth Sense, or the terrible turn of events that is 12 minutes. The key to how much a failed trope affects the plot originates from its importance to the overall narrative. So while a major plot twist could ruin a tale, a minor plot twist couldn't have that much effect at all.
Whoa! This is worthless.
It's less than worthless, my boy.
And that is the case with the current trope and ingredient that we're talking about, Chekhov's gun. Originating from letters written from Anton Chekhov advising young playwrights, the Chekhov's gun describes a phenomenon where a weapon introduced in a story must be used by the end of the tale. Generally, this comes in the form of a firearm. Think, for example, of a shotgun hanging above a fireplace in a zombie story. After you see that in a book, movie, or show, you know that the gun is going to be used to shoot the head off the shoulders of a zombie. One of the first examples that comes to mind from this very scenario is Shaun of the Dead. The main characters comment on the gun while in the pub. They eventually have to grab it and use it. Oddly enough, it's a loaded gun in the UK, which is weird, but this is a comedy, so it doesn't really need to be explained all that much. But this is where I got the example from. Of course, it doesn't have to be one gun. It could be, for example, a bunch of them. An equivalent example would be from Hot Fuzz, where there's an entire arsenal of firearms that need to be shot by the end of the movie. So many bullets fly through the air that it's hard to know if every gun was actually used. Plus, there is a bomb in that tale. And another example would be from the movie Tremors, where the preppers have so many guns in their bunker that it could arm an entire branch of a military, or take out a single monster. But, of course, that leads to another example of Chekhov's gun that doesn't involve real weapons. It's a branch of this trope involving setups and payoffs. There are many plot points established throughout tropes that come back around to get the characters in or out of trouble. A machine that makes loud noises, a pogo stick, a bulldozer, and even a few throwaway statements from earlier in the film. That's the entire point of Chekhov's gun. It's establishing something in a story, foreshadowing future events, and eventually paying off the entire situation. It's a method used to reward the audience for paying attention. It helps them feel as clever as the main characters. In a way, it's the exact opposite of a request for people to enjoy a tale by turning their brain off. Instead of numbly consuming something, the Chekhov's gun asks you to contemplate what's actually happening in front of you. Think. Of course, the Chekhov's gun isn't an absolute trope. I'm sure that you can think of plenty of firearms in mystery and police officer stories where the gun isn't always used. Law & Order, Psych, Monk, NCIS, these are all examples where guns get shown but are not always used. For example, the police pull their weapon to subdue a perp without firing a single bullet, or you see the firearms holstered at their hip the entire time. Oftentimes, this has to do with the intent of the scene. Do the protagonists feel in enough danger to pull their guns? Is the threat intense enough for them to shoot? Who's the coward? who's brave, who's out of their mind, who knows when to quit. So the Chekhov's gun could simply be used to establish the scene or simply have internal consistencies. Even if a cop doesn't need to pull his or her gun, it would make sense for them to no longer randomly have it. Internal consistency is important because it could break someone's immersion and investment in the story. While that is important, there is the opposite of the Chekhov's gun, when a weapon is introduced but purposely not fired or have any bullets in them. One good example would be from Dirty Harry using the threat of bullets as an imitation factor when he ran out of shots. Another would be in Yakuza 0, where Nishiki pulled a gun on his adopted brother but didn't shoot because he couldn't bring himself to kill his family. Instead of giving a physical payoff, these scenes give an emotional payoff and develop the personalities involved.
Oh, beautiful.
Just like how a Chekhov's gun doesn't need to be an actual weapon, the tool involved doesn't need to be a firearm. A blade could do. Just to bring it back around and praise the movie instead of just critique it, Puss in Boots 2 does this with a knife. Or it could be an entirely different item. When told that the One Ring turns people invisible and corrupts those that use it, we all know that it's eventually going to be used in Lord of the Rings. Even if this example is more of an anchor holding the character down than anything actually useful. And it could just be something as simple as a bit of training in a story coming back to be useful. So many shonen anime do this that it's insane. Naruto trains a new jutsu or transformation, and guess what he needs to win his next fight? Bankai gets introduced in Bleach. Guess it's time for Ichigo to get to work on that. Or something as simple as training to be a Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball Z, which was introduced early into the Frieza saga arc and then eventually paid off at the very end of that long section of the story. And just like that, the world was forever changed for weebs around the planet, including me. Of course, longer franchises has the problem of stacking Chekhov guns. If an ability is introduced and then completely forgotten after its first use, it will confuse the audience. I brought this up with my Harry Potter Time Turner video. Or, if the series introduces a new ability out of nowhere, it could be just as confusing. How was force healing a thing in Rise of Skywalker when the greatest Jedi in the universe never once showed such an ability? And those problems can stack up on each other the longer that a franchise goes on. There's more to remember, there's more to think about, there's more weapons that need to be paid off or explained away. It's a balancing act, and when done well, it can improve the audience investment in the story by leaps and bounds. Everything clicks in their heads and they feel proud of their investment. A great example comes from Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn trilogy, where a single earring is brought up multiple times throughout the 3 books. While you remember it's there and will eventually need to be important, the significance isn't revealed to the very end of the overall plot, because by the time you need to remember it, you've already forgotten all about it.
Must have slipped my mind.
The reason all of this is important is because it grounds the audience in a fictional world. If a writer points something out but never uses it, it can confuse the people enjoying the story. This is especially true if attention is brought to the Chekhov's gun multiple times. If there isn't a payoff, those enjoying the plot could feel cheated. It will make them think that their entire time, thought, and effort were all pointless, and you never want to make a member of the audience think that the story is pointless, because when they go down that rabbit hole, their ability to care about you and your writing vanishes. Or there could be a worst case scenario where the writer didn't even establish the important weapon, tool, or ability earlier in the plot. In that case, the thing needed to save the day appears out of nowhere, and that becomes one of the greatest of cardinal sins in writing, a deus ex machina. But the full details on that are for another video. So while the Chekhov's gun might not seem important at first, it is an essential tool in the writing process. Without establishing the weapon in the story, it becomes an incoherent mess. People lose their immersion. The entire situation falls apart. The ingredients in the meal gives people food poisoning. It's important to plan and think these things out. And even if you don't have any interest in writing yourself, it's important to understand the significance of the trope. It helps you appreciate the effort put into this art form. So when you see a gun, weapon, or ability get introduced in a story, try to remember it. If what you're reading, watching, or playing has any quality control, that Chekhov's gun will come back around. But what do you think? Am I completely off base here? What do you think of Chekhov's gun? What's your favorite use of this trope? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your perspectives. And thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, please remember that I just released my original novel, Dance of Rose and Death, book 1 in the Written in Stone series, link in the description, and my second book, Above Heaven, will be released in May 2023. I hope that you will check them both out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.